Hey, everybody, it's Naomi Wolf with Outspoken, and thank you for joining us. I'm here tonight to talk about a obviously huge news story that broke in the last couple of days. And it could be kind of the thread that unravels the whole uh, COVID virus slash vaccine perpetrator criminal syndicate, essentially. But it's certainly an incredible start, and it's one of the MAGA wins that we really do need to credit. Even just this initial gesture is so transformational and kind of breaking the spell of no one can be held accountable, no one can be investigated from, the untouchable third rail COVID vaccine rollout, COVID virus rollout, I should say first, that it's a huge historic breakthrough. And I'm also going to share with you some information from 2021 and 2022 and 2023 that has kind of been lost along the way or forgotten before the opening of this latest development. So I'm going to share my screen so you can see that, of course, a former Fauci aide has been charged with conspiring to evade COVID-related records requests. This is Politico. So ex-NIH official David Morenz is accused of concealing emails about potentially risky virus research. So he's an NIH official, David Morenz, and a former senior official at the NIH, indicted on obstruction of justice and conspiracy charges for allegedly concealing federal records about research into viruses like the one that caused the COVID pandemic. So he was indicted, David Morenz, by a federal grand jury early this month, 3 felony counts for allegedly using a Gmail account to hide official communications about controversial federally funded projects studying coronaviruses in bats. The indictment was unsealed this past Monday, when Morenz made a brief appearance in court and was released on his own recognizance. So the wrongdoing, alleged against him is substantial. Morenz allegedly sent and received emails on his private account to get around FOIA requirements, Freedom of Information Act obligations to keep records inside the systems of the federal government so people who submit FOIA requests can get those documents. So he's kind of bypassing that records collection, rights, like hiding it, essentially. And there were at least 8 FOIA requests submitted for such records by various organizations, Science Magazine, Judicial Watch, the Heritage Foundation. So it's not as if no one was looking for the records. People were submitting FOIA requests. Now, what's really part of the bombshell nature of this this indictment is that Morenz served as a senior advisor to Anthony Fauci, the former longtime director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. Senior advisor is a really close and important role. People who are not familiar with how these agencies and the White House, for that matter, work may not know what an important role it is, but a senior advisor is kind of a lateral official who's valued as a consultant, essentially. So David Morenz was very fundamentally in the mix because he was basically, guiding, whispering in the ear of Dr. Fauci all the time. And Dr. Fauci was consulting him. So now we've got the guy who's at one remove. And I would say, Brian O'Shea is right here in the room. He'll join us shortly just to jump in to update us from his own research. But I'm guessing that he would say that the systematic method we see here is that the indictment goes for the guy next to Dr. Fauci rather than going for Dr. Fauci, because the guy next to Dr. Fauci is in a position to be leaned on, pressured to provide testimony, to turn against Dr. Fauci and the other more senior actors in this drama. I don't know if you'd agree with that, sweetheart, but that's my guess of what you would say. So Fauci's not accused of wrongdoing. And the indictment also references two unindicted co-conspirators. And there's speculation about whom they might be. There's Politico implies that they are Peter Daszak, the zoologist and former president of EcoHealth Alliance, and Gerald Koish, a physician and former associate director of Boston University's infectious diseases lab. Remember that the first report, I'll never forget this, of COVID kind of being released, the virus into the American public, was at the Boston airport, as I recall, because there had been a conference or convention about infectious diseases. That was the story at that time. So it's very likely, I would bet on Polymarket, I would bet like 80% that there's going to be a link there with Boston University's infectious disease lab. So this is the indictment, and a lot of people might be wondering, what does this mean? House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer issued a statement praising prosecutors for indicting Morenz. Quote, "We caught Dr. Morenz red-handed," Comer said. "I applaud the Trump Justice Department for taking action to hold this public official accountable for hiding information from the American people." So that's Politico. Now, people are posting really nice comments. I just want to take a minute to refresh everyone's memory, because we've been through so much in the last 6 years, but let's dial back to 2020 and 2021. When COVID was announced, literally kind of introduced, branded in March of 2020, people really had to be told what it was and told to worry about it, essentially, and how to worry about it. And even more dramatically, as you recall, 2 weeks to stop the spread, told to stay indoors. The whole script, the whole drama, and it's painful to remember, but you've got to remember it. The whole put on your mask 6 feet apart. It came from Wuhan. It came from a bat. It came from a lab leak. It came from a wet market where people were buying animals for soup, right? What was that? The lab leak was real. I'm sorry, but the cover up of the lab leak. It came from a rare animal that they make soup out of. I mean, all these dramatic elements of a very kind of shocking and weird and implausible story in retrospect, all were rolled out, and they were rolled out by a handful of people with a gigantic marketing campaign, essentially, a literally the kind of marketing campaign that people hire teams for to roll out a new car or a new app or a new piece of technology or home decorating element. Seriously, it was a marketing campaign. And the person who was the face of that was, of course, Dr. Fauci, to some extent Dr. Birx. And there was so much drama, as you recall, around other scientists saying, hey, this looks like it was intentionally made more virulent. This doesn't look natural. It looks like a spillover. I'm sorry, it looks like not a spillover, I beg your pardon. The bad guys were trying to say this was a natural spillover from the animal world to the human world. There was nothing artificial or weaponized or introduced, enhanced about it. Hey, Autumn Smith. Dee Dee Tudor remembers the bat, the pangolin. That was the animal I was trying to remember. The pangolin, the raccoon dog, all got blamed. Such a farce. You're absolutely right. Thank you, Dee Dee Tudor. That was just what I was trying to remember, and I had forgotten about the raccoon dog. They were all blamed, but the drama again and again for months, as the official narrative was really struggling to be set in stone, and finally was set in stone because they got us to stay home and be isolated and completely vulnerable to what was coming at us from our screens and our phones. But before that, there was kind of a fight still for reality, and there were scientists, as I mentioned, saying the furin cleave looks engineered. This sequence looks artificially enhanced or altered. And then there was huge backlash from Dr. Fauci and his allies, calling these people conspiracy theorists and hyperventilating people, imagining things and making fun of them. And even respected peer-reviewed publications like the Lancet got into the act and buttressed Dr. Fauci's assertion, claim that this was, quote, zoonotic, that this virulent virus, SARS-CoV-2, had come from the natural world, the world of animals, and spilled over into humans totally accidentally. Oh my God, what can we do? And there were a number of weird cover stories, like someone bought a pangolin in a wet market because Chinese people make soup out of pangolins. Someone put a bat in soup, right, and made bat soup. Like, this was literally coming out of legacy media in a completely nonsensical way. But we didn't know it was nonsensical because it was completely new, and completely new. So we were at the mercy of this back and forth. Finally, the scientists who were saying, and they were saying things like, they were reminding us that research on weaponizing viruses in this way was illegal and had been illegal since the Obama era, since 2017. And they were pointing out that the research had been kind of outsourced in a kind of globalization type way, that the US had just hired or funded scientists at Wuhan to do the research that was now illegal in the United States, weaponizing viruses. And they were shut down. Okay, I'm just kind of reminding you what the back and forth was in 2020 and 2020, early 2021. They were shut down, they were smeared, they were attacked. And people who were saying, hey, the Wuhan lab isn't even that secure. There have been outbreaks, and what are the odds that, they're studying this virus in the Wuhan lab and then it kind of breaks out in Wuhan from a wet market? That seems kind of, too coincidental to be a coincidence. I'm sure you remember the comedian who said, like, does Hershey, Jon Stewart, who said, does Hershey Park have chocolate? There was an outbreak of chocolate in Hershey Park. What a coincidence, right? But that reasonable question was shut down as being a conspiracy theory, and so on. So, just by sheer brute force of propaganda, all the people who were asking reasonable questions about, hey, this looks weaponized, this looks artificially made more virulent, hey, there are problems with the Wuhan lab, hey, the NIH kept funding research of this kind, they were marginalized and silenced. So now, of course, this is all coming back into the news cycle because David Morin's got indicted. So what you're going to see is a kind of a circling of the wagons, and I'm predicting this, that Rand Paul is very central to what's going to happen next. This is my guess. This is my prediction, because he asked directly, in the depth of lockdown, in a congressional hearing with Dr. Fauci, did you fund research to make bat coronaviruses more damaging, more deadly? And Dr. Fauci, as you recall, shouted at him very histrionically. It was a very dramatic exchange, and said, the person who's lying here is you, essentially, and pointed his finger. I'm sure you remember that. It was shocking. Well, Dr. Fauci was lying, and lying to Congress is a felony. And Rand Paul knows that Dr. Fauci is lying, but you don't have to take Senator Paul's word for it, because the record that Dr. Fauci was lying is there, right? It just takes one layer of digging. It's been kind of buried, with a layer of dirt, like a shallow grave. But the headline I want to give you right now, before I show you evidence that Brian O'Shea, my husband, investigator Brian O'Shea of the podcast Investigate Everything, brought to me in 2021, that I posted on X and immediately got shut down, as you recall, kicked off of X. I had earlier been posting about menstrual damage to women from the injection, but now, and I thought that was the reason I was kicked off of X, but now I think this either is instead the reason I got kicked off of X, or also the reason I got kicked off of X. But Brian found the CV of Dr. Ralph Barrick of the University of North Carolina, of his assistant, yes, which shows extensive funding by the NIH of research in the United States, as well as in China, to basically develop COVID, what became COVID. So the headline that you need to take away from this episode is we, the United States, specifically Dr. Fauci, Dr. Barrick, and his colleagues, are responsible for funding the development of what became SARS-CoV-2, which shut down the entire world. Millions of people died. The pretext for a rollout of vaccines, from which hundreds of thousands of people have died and probably millions have been injured. We invented it. We developed it. It wouldn't have existed without this research. The research is ours. The research is Dr. Fauci's. Dr. Fauci funded the scientists to take benign coronaviruses out in the wild, living in bats, and take them into labs and weaponize them, make them more deadly, publish studies about how they were making them more deadly, and then, whether intentionally or not, that material got released into the human population of this planet. That's the headline. Okay, Dr. Fauci did that. Dr. Barrick did that, and the evidence is right out there that they were doing that. Now, what they were doing, just to be clear, is since in 2016, Dr. Barrick, under NIH funding, meaning Dr. Fauci's funding, was doing this research at the University of North Carolina and elsewhere. By 2017, because of Obama's edict about bioweapons, ending research into bioweapons, Dr. Fauci funded outsourced science, still overseen by Ralph Barrick. And that's why, in a peer-reviewed article that Ralph Barrick published, about making bat coronaviruses more infectious, he thanked the bat lady. What was her name, honey? Xi Jinping, the one who was blamed for actually developing and inadvertently releasing the coronavirus when the lab leak became, incontrovertible. But it was us. It was us. We, Dr. Barrick, Dr. Fauci, it conspired, essentially. And, I'm not really worried. I'm not worried about Dr. Barrick or Dr. Fauci suing me, because everything I'm saying is true, and there's an abundant record of this. They stopped overtly doing the research in the United States, with 11 exceptions, which I'll get to. But just outsourced it again, the way you outsource customer service for a Walmart in Peoria to, people who are living in Bombay. They just outsourced the same research, the same bat coronaviruses, the same bat studies, the same bat testing, to Wuhan, right? And to the Wuhan lab. And literally the teams worked together like this on the same research, but they got around in this flimsy, superficial way, the Obama rule against experimenting on bioweapons in the United States. I'm sorry, gain of function experimentation. So, and gain of function literally means gaining a function of making something more deadly. So what I do want to say is there are 11 locations in the United States in which research on bat coronaviruses continued under Dr. Barrick's oversight. One of them is Montana. So there were reports of a disease that seemed as if it could be COVID in America at the end of 2019. And I've speculated that there could have been COVID at the end of 2019 in America, from Dr. Barrick's own local experimentation in the United States, funded by the NIH. So now let's go ahead and take a look at what Brian found. And it's kind of amazing. And Brian, if you want to step in here, I'm going to show people what this is. Mm-hmm. And so here you can see this is from November 25th, 2021, when he originally posted it. By the way, Brian has been completely hacked in the last couple of days. His ex got hacked, meaning his ex account got hacked. So he's right over the target, obviously. He's got a number of hot stories. I don't know if it's this one that got him hacked, but it was a pretty bad hack. And go to @RealBrianO'Shea on X if you want to see what he's doing now, because the other account, don't touch it. So this is a weird thing. Eric Donaldson was Dr. Ralph Barrick's assistant at the University of North Carolina. He wrote a book called The Seventh Extinction, and it is fiction, but often it really makes me think about, I read it, it makes me think about Soviet societies, other closed societies in which people had to tell the truth in a fictionalized way. And it's about a world, the Genesis Project, right, in which people are expendable, and a mad scientist loves nature and animals so much that he engineers a way to... May I? Yes, please step in. It's a thinly veiled version of some of the things that were going on with the work. I mean, it would appear that that was happening around Eric Donaldson. But the thing that is really amazing, and why Brian O'Shea is such an incredible detective, is that Brian O'Shea found Ralph Barrick's assistant's CV, and it's a long CV, and Ralph Barrick's own CVs have really been scrubbed. So here I'm going to call up the CV that Brian found of Eric Donaldson, and I'm going to show it to you because they didn't scrub this one. And it is chock-a-block with evidence that Dr. Barrick and his colleagues were doing gain-of-function research funded by the NIH, meaning funded by Dr. Fauci. So here is Eric Donaldson, PhD. His work address, well, we don't want to show you that because we don't want to dox him. But he worked at UNC. It's public still. And it says I am currently employed as a research assistant professor in the Department of Epidemiology, working in the lab of Dr. Ralph Barrick. And the date of this would have been...
I think it's a 2019 resume.
2019. I am funded by the NIAID, Dr. Fauci's agency, to conduct a study looking at the viruses in bats and studying how viruses cross the species barrier to emerge into new populations. In addition, I'm working with Dr. Barrick to resurrect bat coronaviruses to determine the cross-species transmission potential of a variety of novel coronaviruses identified in bats. I hope you can see this first paragraph really clearly. Let's take a look and make sure you can see it. Yeah, you can see that very clearly. I am also funded as a Gillings Innovative Lab something through the Gillings School of Global Public Health to do a norovirus evolution study looking at different genotypes, genogroups and genotypes of this virus to determine how this virus persists in human populations, and using structural bioinformatics and evolution to guide computational design of candidate vaccine strains. So in lay terms, Dr. Ralph Barrick's research assistant, Eric Donaldson, is studying with him resurrecting bat coronaviruses. They're dormant, they're not dangerous, they're resurrecting them to determine if and how they can cross species from bats to other species like humans. In addition, he is also looking at how to create, through modeling, a design of vaccine strains for the virus that they are going to resurrect in bats. Okay, it's all right here. This is a 2019 CV. Everything, the whole nightmare of the years 2020 to the present is in this paragraph in 2019. Research associate, I worked in Dr. Ralph Barrick's lab from April 2008 through July 2009 as a research associate studying viral evolution and protein structure, as well as candidate vaccine strains. Oh, there's some bad things ahead, but let's skip over that. These are his lab trainings, mouse handling techniques, the various things he did as a young man, UNC, guest lecturer, and teacher training. I'm going to skip ahead. All right. Memberships, American Society of Virology. All right, ERA grant. Here we are. Here's the funding, my friends. Pay close attention. Screenshot this. Congress people, senators, please screenshot. We are on page 4 of Eric Donaldson's 2019 CV, which Brian O'Shea, SPI, the best investigator in North America, if not the West, located after Dr. Ralph Barrick's CVs were scrubbed from the internet. And this belies Dr. Fauci's claims that they did not fund coronavirus research, gain of function research. Here is the gain of function research. It dates back to 2009. This is a grant for $301,000 from NIH, NIAID. Metagenomic analysis of the virome of Eastern North American bats. The major goal of this project are to define the virome, meaning viral environment, of 7 to 10 different bat species that cohabitate in one roost in Maryland, that's one of the locations, to determine the viral population of each and define the role of orthologous receptors to viral cross-species transmission. Morenz is from Maryland. David Morenz is from Maryland, notes Bryant.
Well, that's where he works. That's
where he works.
NIH
NIH is also in Maryland. B, University Research Council grant. This is about noroviruses. Bovine and porcine model systems generate an infectious clone of the virus to develop an animal model for norovirus infection. Well, this isn't good. It hasn't happened yet, but it certainly is about making infectious clones of viruses that allow human viruses to adapt to cow and pork viruses. Let's see. Super antigen VPLs. Okay. Okay. So this is very early. Gilling's Innovation Lab grant, he got nearly $80,000, or his team did, which included Ralph Barrick, I believe, at UNC, structure-based super antigen vaccines for the prevention of childhood diarrhea. The major goals of this proposal are to use structural bioinformatics and computational biology to generate super antigen VLPs as candidate vaccine strains against noroviruses and all RNA viruses. All right, so they're working this early on creating vaccines against viruses, including RNA viruses. So you hear the kind of precursor, the preamble of where they eventually got to. And here we go, pending support. And this is 2016, so things get really hot. 2011 to 2016. They've been working on this for 9 years by the time COVID was launched. Okay, so this is more than $500,000, $555,000. NIH, there's so much funding from Dr. Fauci for this team to do this thing. Development of nanosensor platform for SARS diagnosis. The goals of the proposal are to develop nanosensors that detect different coronaviruses and influenza viruses and test these under BSL-3 conditions. That's a level of lab security. The PI is a nanosensor expert, the director, with expertise in SARS coronaviruses. And we will provide computational biology support and testing of the system with samples. So here, what you have from 2011 to 2016 is a proposal which was funded by the NIH for $500,000 to build something that would be a test. What, later the purpose was served by the PCR test for SARS-CoV-2. For SARS-CoV. It's not SARS-CoV-2 yet. But again, you're seeing the development of a test protocol. Can we find a way to get it to go from animals to humans? Can we find a way to test it? All the elements of the industry that became the COVID virus, the COVID test and the COVID vaccine are all in kind of embryonic form in this CV dating back to 2011, all funded by Dr. Fauci, NIH, NIAID. Here we go. Things get even hotter. Again, 2011 to 2016, grants under preparation. A multiple investigator R01 grant to the National Science Foundation, NSF, collaborative research defining the role of North American bats in virus evolution and dissemination within various habitats. The major goals of this proposal are to determine the viral populations in different bat species that share a common habitat in the northeastern US. Determine viral trafficking between bats and different vertebrates, we are vertebrates, and invertebrates that share the same habitat, and develop computational tools to facilitate rapid response to cross-species transmission events. So in lay language, this grant, and the numbers are getting much bigger, you guys. This is $1.36 million and change. I'll say that again, $1.36 million and change. Now, they are studying viruses in different bat species, not far away, not in China, not somewhere nothing bad can happen, in the northeastern United States, which, by the way, is, I think, our most densely populated part of the country. New York, Philadelphia, Boston are in the northeastern US. Excuse me. They are going to determine how the viruses are transmitted and They are going to develop modeling tools, computational tools to prepare a response to cross-species transmission events. Now, remember the grants a few pages ago acknowledged that there is no cross-species transmission. They're trying to figure out and formulate cross-species transmission a few grants ago. Now, in this grant, which goes up to 2016, they are asking for money to develop software, essentially, to facilitate a rapid response, presumably by public health agencies, to cross-species transmission events, meaning from animals to human, or maybe some animals to other animals. It's not clear, but it can include animals to human, that when they started out with the smaller grants, they're acknowledging doesn't even exist. So at this point, it implies they're making progress, making sure that this bat coronavirus, which is really bad for bats, but hasn't crossed over to humans, can cross over to humans, has crossed over into humans, and that when it does, you'll have the software, CDC, NIH will have the software to track it and, tell everyone that it's a giant public health emergency. And this grant ended in 2016, you guys. It's like watching a horror film. Now, here's an R01 grant to the NIH. Who's in charge of the NIH? Dr. Fauci. Again, 2011, 2016. Wow. This work, there's so much funding. There's millions of dollars in funding here. I can't believe Dr. Fauci lied to Congress. There's so many millions. Honey, we're up to like 4 million now. Cross-species emergence of coronaviruses from bats. That's the name of the grant. This work builds upon our ERA grant. See, the grants are building one upon the other, which allowed us to discover, they discovered it. It wouldn't exist if they hadn't discovered it. If they didn't go looking for the novel coronavirus in bats, it would have stayed in bats, never bothered anyone, the odds are, which allowed us to discover a novel coronavirus in bats that is closely related to a human pathogen, human coronavirus 229E. The major goals of the proposal are to characterize the coronaviruses found in bat species in the northeastern United States, densely populated, by sequencing several bat fecal samples. They're gathering bat poop to determine the complete genomic sequences, isolate and or synthetically resurrect, meaning reproduce them artificially, these coronaviruses using in silico biology, and assess the ability of these viruses to emerge into the human host by using orthologous receptors and homologous innate immune factors such as interferon antagonists. Can you effing believe it? Guys, I'm going to read this again, and this is on page 5 of Eric Donaldson's CV that Brian O'Shea found in 2021, shortly before I was kicked off of X after posting it. That was the day I was kicked off. You guys, I'm going to read this again. It's so important. It's so important. An R01 grant to the NIH. Who's in charge of the NIH? Dr. Fauci. 1.85 million. By the way, this is the same sequence of grants. They're simultaneous, right? July 2011 to June of 2016. It's 1.3 million, 1.85 million, $500,000. And then, yeah, that's the really big money. And these 3 grants are really the key grants so far. And they're running concurrently. And it's almost $3 million. All right. I'm going to read it again. It's so important. Cross-species emergence of coronaviruses from bats. This work, now it started in 2011. So they were planning for this using these technologies almost a decade before COVID was announced to the world as a pandemic that had jumped from bats to humans. Cross-species emergence of coronaviruses from bats. This work builds, you see how they're building to a thing, right? Upon our ERA grant, which allowed us to discover a novel coronavirus in bats that is closely related to a human pathogen, human coronavirus 229E. So what they're doing is they're saying, oh, look, we finally poked around in enough caves in the northeastern United States to analyzed enough bat poop that we collected from caves to find a virus in bats, which is similar to a human virus. And now we're going to see if we can sequence the bat poop samples to find the genomic sequences, what it's genetically made of, right? And then isolate and or synthetically resurrect. You keep hearing people saying, we haven't seen the virus, right? They could have synthetically, this grant is to synthetically resurrect, artificially reproduce these bat coronaviruses and assess the ability of these viruses to emerge into the human host by using orthologous receptors and homologous innate immune factors, such as interferon antagonists. So I can't stress this enough. The coronaviruses, the bat coronaviruses that are deadly are hanging out harmlessly to humans, not so great for bats, as I understand, in bat poop in caves in the northeastern United States, causing no trouble to humans whatsoever. This guy and his mentor and team, Ralph Barrick at UNC, funded by Dr. Fauci, whose team was reading these grant proposals and saying, hey, that's a good idea, let's fund that, asking questions about it, reading the research when it came in, asking for discussing research to build on the research. They say, hey, go get that poop from the caves in the Northeast, analyze it, see if you can reproduce its genomic sequence, see if you can copy it either organically or synthetically, and then assess, there's never been a more important sentence, the ability of these viruses to emerge into the human host. And here are some ways you can try to do it. They weren't emerging in the human host, you guys. They weren't bothering the human host. They didn't have any contact with the human host. And if they did, if someone was unfortunate enough to come in contact with infected bat poop in the Northeast or in Maryland, it wasn't engineered to cause problems to humans. This research showed the way to make a virus like that cause problems in humans. Oh dear, here's the DARPA prophecy grant. All right, this is $1.76 million. And this is, Donaldson is one of the overseers of this grant. It ends in 2014. Study of coronavirus evolution from the molecular, atomic, and computational perspective. Oh my God. All right, you guys. The major goals of the proposal are to characterize the coronavirus quasi-species using next-generation sequencing to determine the variation of the population under normal in vitro, meaning in glass in the lab, and in vivo, meaning in bodies in real life conditions, and then under various selective pressures, including monoclonal antibody neutralization and orthologous receptor switching, to determine the evolutionary dynamics present in the population. These observations will then be used to determine which viral spike gene genotypes spike, give rise to novel phenotypes that can be used to measure binding to the receptor and or the antibody or both. The ultimate goal of this high-risk grant is to provide an algorithm for predicting routes of coronavirus evolution in the future. Now, I am not a scientist, but what jumps out, of course, at me in this paragraph, this grant now is looking at how would a coronavirus quasi-species, right, a subtype of coronavirus, act in the population. And it's not clear which population this is describing, but it could be human population. It's not clear. Is it bat population? Is it virus population? It's not clear. These observations will then be used to determine which viral spike gene genotypes give rise to novel phenotypes that can be used to measure binding to the receptor. So what jumps out at me that requires more investigation by scientists, hopefully, and I've got a lot of them in my network, is the word spike and the action of binding to the receptor, because you know that both those things came into play with both SARS-CoV-2, the virus, and the action of the vaccine. And so the goal of this high-risk grant, I wonder why it's high risk, I don't know what that means, is to provide an algorithm for predicting routes of coronavirus evolution in the future. So it's like not just this wave of infection, but what's it going to do next? And you remember in the, messaging from NIH about, the virus is changing, it's evolving, it's Omicron and it's Delta and it's this and it's that. He's saying we'll create an algorithm to show you what a novel coronavirus with a viral spike, it looks like it's saying, as part of its action does, not just now, but as it changes. All right, here are some of the publications that Eric Donaldson has been part of. That's not that relevant. Here we go. All the way back to 2010. He was one of the co-authors of Metagenomic Analysis of the Virome of 3 North American bat species, Viral Diversity Between Different Bat Species That Share a Common Habitat. So a decade before COVID, SARS-CoV-2 was announced to the world as a pandemic, Eric Donaldson and his team were looking at the viromes, different viruses in the feces of North American bat species. All right. And I can't stress enough how dangerous that is, because these are viruses that are not bothering humans in densely populated North America, and they're poking around to find the bat poop that has the virus that can be weaponized essentially to harm humans. That is not relevant. That's not relevant. Here's Eric Donaldson, airway well, he's looking at human coronaviruses. Infects, replicates, and produces progeny virions in human ciliated airway epithelial cell cultures. So he's looking, and it's the Journal of Virology, 2010. So he's looking at how coronaviruses, and don't be freaked out by the word coronavirus. A cold is a coronavirus, a flu is a coronavirus, right? One of the genius things that the messaging of COVID did was brand the word coronavirus, which most people had never heard before, to make it seem unbelievably scary, when literally every time you catch cold, you've got a coronavirus infection. But he's looking at how human coronaviruses, a certain kind, affect the cilia, which are the little tiny waving, almost threads that move mucus out of the airways in lungs. And you remember the importance and the impact of damage to the lungs by SARS-CoV-2, right? So this guy was studying damage to the lungs from coronaviruses in 2010, way back then. And Ralph Barrick is one of the co-authors. Here is another one, not relevant, that I can recommend, that I can recognize. So here we've got him with Ralph Barrick, 2009, successful vaccination strategies that protect aged mice from lethal influenza and lethal heterologous SARS-CoV challenge. So way back in 2010, Eric Donaldson and Ralph Barrick and their team are looking at vaccination strategies for elderly mammals, elderly mice, to protect them from the flu and SARS-CoV-2 SARS-CoV coronaviruses. And this is, you remember how carefully elders were identified as being at particular risk from SARS-CoV-2, and how vaccination was rolled out to protect elders in particular. And they're doing the pre-research for that situation in 2010. Not relevant. Oh, wow. Here we go. E.F. Donaldson and Ralph Barrick, and this is 2010, escape from human monoclonal antibody neutralization in the severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus spike glycoprotein. So it's interesting that they knew back in 2010 that monoclonal antibodies could treat, as I read this, severe acute respiratory syndrome, bad problems breathing, pneumonia, lung issues, subsequent to coronavirus spike glycoprotein affecting the lungs. And that's 2010. And you can hear the echo of that with the rollout of SARS-CoV-2. This is about herd immunity, viral growth. Here we go. This is relevant. This is 2008. Donaldson and Ralph Barrick, synthetic reconstruction of an infectious bat SARS-like coronavirus. Synthetic reconstruction of an infectious bat SARS-like coronavirus. This is published. They had synthetically reconstructed an infectious bat SARS-like coronavirus in 2008. I need say no more. Oh my God. Here's Donaldson. This is making me cry. 2008, and Barrick, the plasticity, meaning that you can change it around, right? Doesn't mean plastic, of the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein receptor usage, dependence, evolution, and species specificity of both zoonotic and human tropic SARS coronavirus, 2008. So way back in 2008, they're looking at the spike protein, how it can be changed, and its effect on the receptors. And also zoonotic and human versions of it, essentially. And this all, of course, hugely at play with SARS-CoV-2. So the whole structure of SARS-CoV-2, the thing that made it most damaging, the spike protein, right, is already being identified, if not created. I don't quite get the distinction at this point, but certainly identified in 2008. Also 2008, mechanisms of persistence and immune evasion in human populations. That's about another virus. And these are other viruses. It's amazing. This is 2008, Donaldson and Barrick, systemic assembly of a full-length infectious clone of human coronavirus. I will read that again, 2008, systematic assembly of a full-length infectious clone of human coronavirus. They were creating human coronaviruses in 2000, all the way back to 2008. This is norovirus. That's not as relevant. This is about monoclonal antibodies, and this is way back in 2008. If humans are challenged by a zoonotic spillover from SARS-CoV-2. So literally, I guess what I want to say here as an academic is that anyone who's funding this team knows for a decade before March 2020, when the people funding it, who are Dr. Fauci and NIH and IAAD, show up on the world stage to say, oh my God, there was a spillover. They knew for a decade intimately that Barrick, Donaldson, and their team were developing, weaponizing bat coronaviruses to see how they could cross over from animals to humans and they had identified the spike protein as the damaging part, and that they were creating projections about how it would play out in the human population. So this is number 20, Donaldson and Barrick. I'm going to cry. Honey, I'm literally going to cry. Synthetic reconstruction of zoonotic and early human SARS-CoV-2 isolates that produce fatal disease in senescent mice. I'm going to read that again, you guys. 2008, Barrick and Donaldson and team. Synthetic, meaning artificial, reconstruction of zoonotic, meaning in animals, and early human SARS-CoV-2 isolates that produce fatal disease in senescent mice. They artificially reconstructed animal-based and early human-based SARS coronavirus isolates that are damaging enough to kill elderly mice. That's what that means. And that's way back to 2007. So they're literally taking elderly mice and studying them and creating reconstructions, artificial reconstructions of zoonotic and early human SARS coronavirus isolates that will kill, that will make those elderly mice so sick that they will die. So again, their funders read the proposals, they read the research as it's being done, they read the research summaries when they're concluded, they interview the scientists, then especially if they give them more funding, it means do more, build on this. They discuss the direction of these experiments as they go along. And this is over the course of a decade. Dr. Fauci and his team were discussing these experiments and saying, yes, zero in here. Yes, build on that. What about the elderly mice, right? Like the email exchange between Dr. Fauci and this team has got to be revelatory. But there is no way you're going to get a decade of experimentation, more, 13 years of experimentation on the things that became COVID in 2020 without everyone funding this, knowing exactly what they were doing and zeroing in to fine tune it. Oh my God, honey, I'm going to cry some more. 2008, Donaldson and Barrick and their team. Mechanisms of zoonotic, meaning animal-based, severe acute respiratory syndrome. That means you can't breathe. Your lungs are shutting down. Coronavirus host range expansion in human airway epithelium. So they're experimenting on how animal-based coronaviruses affect human epithelia, which is the lining of the lung, right? In human airways, in human lungs, the passages in human lungs. Can you believe this, honey? Can you believe what I'm reading? Okay. That is a genetic manipulation of mouse hepatitis viruses, a special essay on a special anthology on SARS and other coronaviruses, strategies and protocols, 2008. This is really hard to do, baby. I don't really understand that one. Don't understand that one. Okay, here it is. Oh my God. This is 2006. Donaldson and Barrick, right there. Vaccine efficacy, so they're looking at vaccines in senescent, meaning elderly mice, challenged, meaning infected or sick with recombinant SARS-CoV-2 bearing epidemic and zoonotic spike variants. Holy cow. Back to 2006, they were making elderly mice sick with SARS-CoV viruses, and teasing out the variants of the viruses that would have epidemic potential and have spike in them, animal-based spike. which is the thing that makes SARS-CoV-2 so damaging. This is really so heartbreaking. We're almost done. Oh my God. So 2005, they went back so far. Construction, meaning they're building it, and characterization of a civet cat-like SARS coronavirus. So basically, they're building artificial coronaviruses, as I understand this, that resemble or act like coronaviruses in the animal population. And then they're tampering with them, right? And testing them on like human lung lining cells, that's epithelial cells, to see what happens, or making elderly mice sick with them, and then if the mice die, they publish that result. So like, I don't know about you, but like, look at this. They're not looking at what they're looking at is how to make it kill. That's what they're looking at. How to make it kill, how to make it more damaging, how to make it spill over from animals to humans. And then once it spills out, once it can spill over, make it damaging, focus on the spike. How does it kill? Does it kill these elderly mice? Does it kill? What does it do? Does it make your lungs worse on human lungs? It's not like, studying what makes people healthy or what makes people recover. They're studying how does it kill? It's all aimed at the damage and replicating the damage artificially. And here we have coronavirus vaccine development way back to 2005. So what you're seeing there is the virus replication studies and the vaccine studies are going on exactly at the same time. You roll out the virus, you've got the vaccine. They're the same researchers. And that is it for the publications. You've got bats and white nose syndrome, searching for clues in the bat virome, 2010. You've got a computational design of super immunogen vaccines against RNA viruses, back to 2010. A lot of people are paying attention to the bat research. Bozeman, Montana. Now, this was one of the locations of Ralph Barrick's research funded by the NIH in America, right? The bat virome, understanding the role of viral trafficking between different bat species. So first they're looking at how does it go from bat species to bat species, and then how does it go cross species? How does it affect humans, right? Exploring the intersection of viral cross-species transmission and bat ecology. They're looking at cross-species transmission a decade before COVID. Looking at the viromes of North American bats, animal models, infectious clone expressing the reporter gene. These are not relevant, and other presentations. And then I keep looking at the receptor binding site 2 may direct the emergence of novel norovirus strains. So they're looking at other other viruses for sure, but they're definitely looking at the thing that became relevant with COVID, which is the receptor binding. Okay, you've got Eric Donaldson, Ralph Barrick, Eric Donaldson, Ralph Barrick. Here we go. Recovery and growth of a bat SARS-like coronavirus, 2008. So they've been working on this for 12 years, and they did it. And his number one reference, Ralph Barrick. And I'm sorry to, like, honey, am I doxing him? There's Ralph Barrick's address. It's all public. Other people who, God knows what their culpability is. A lot of his co-authors there. And they're all at UNC. Here's a SUNY Buffalo. Here's UNC. Here's Vanderbilt. And there's Dr. Ralph Barrick at Chapel Hill. So, you guys, that's unbelievable.
Remember when they look for the bats?
Oh, baby, you have to come here and talk because they can't hear you.
You do your thing.
All right.
When they looked for the bats, remember?
Brian is saying something.
They only looked in China.
Oh, yeah. Brian is pointing out when they look, you're right. When they looked for the bats, they only looked in China. But think about it. They all knew, Dr. Fauci knew, his whole team knew, all the people who funded Eric Donaldson and Dr. Barrick's studies on bat coronaviruses going back to 2008, they knew that there was research, there were bats being researched for infectious cross-species viruses in their feces in the Northeast, in Maryland, and in Montana. So
against Obama's order.
Against the law, against Obama's restriction on gain of function research. So I can't believe there's only 740 people watching, because I think this is the most important broadcast we've ever done. It's 1 a.m. Brian reminds me. We're Pacific time. I'm going to sign off there. You can see, I'm going to pin Brian's post that has Eric Donaldson's.
Wait, before you do that, I want to just kind of, I don't want to bury a lead here.
Mm-hmm.
Can I just?
Yes, Brian's going to come.
I just want to speak about Donaldson a little bit.
Brian's going to come sit down and talk about Donaldson because it's his research.
All right. Sorry, I'm a little hot. This hotel room.
Yeah, you're hot. Sorry.
Okay. But so Eric Donaldson is, he was a research assistant on the resume until present time down at Barrick's Chapel Hill, North Carolina lab. Now, what's significant about the research on Donaldson's resume, the thing you can connect to Dajak is, I'm still trying to confirm it, but there's a guy named Aravinda De Silva. And there's like 3 De Silvas that work at Eco Health Alliance, which was Peter Dajak's firm. You also have a violation of the pause or, Obama's order. But what I really want to read to you is that I had Grok pull up a summary of the 7th extinction in the book. And I was shocked when I read this book. Because this is in the heart of everything. I think I picked it up around 2021, 2022. But it was beyond just subtle similarities to the pandemic, and not just the outbreak, but also the government reaction to it. And so I just want to read this summary of the 7th extinction. I think it's worth a read. And again, I don't know what Eric Donaldson's goal was in writing this book. It's a decent thriller if you like those kind of Michael Crichton type thrillers. But here it is. Okay. Overall plot overview. Dr. Victor Krauss, who's got the European name, I'm going to say kind of like Dajak, a passionate wildlife ecologist, spends years fighting global warming, habitat loss, and species extinction through science and policy, but sees no meaningful purpose against humanity's greed and overconsumption. What's that?
No meaningful progress against
progress. Convinced that the only way to save the planet's biodiversity is to drastically reduce the human population. He secretly develops and releases a highly lethal engineered virus designed to cull humanity down to roughly 1 billion people. Called the Genesis Project. The 7th extinction event targeting Homo sapiens. The virus spreads globally.
Oh my gosh.
Triggering a catastrophic pandemic.
Holy cow.
That kills billions.
Oh my gosh.
Causes societal collapse, fear, and chaos. In the midst of the apocalypse, a
Montana virologist
working on a vaccine.
Oh my gosh.
Assembles an unlikely group of friends and allies to track down the increasingly brazen Victor, halt the virus's spread or effects, and attempt to save humankind.
What remains of humankind.
The narrative blends technical scientific elements, virus engineering, like his resume, epidemiology, and ecology. And what's really interesting about this story, if you read it and you know the whole cast of characters from the real Dajak network of Eco Health Alliance and the Barrick Labs and everything, you can kind of pick them out if you know those people well enough in this book. And maybe I was reaching, but Dajak kind of reminds me of Krauss. I think Donaldson kind of puts himself as the hero. And I could just be spitballing here, but They go on and on, but what was really interesting about this is, like, they kind of really went into the global outbreak, the virus's rapid spread
When was
style
this
breakdown.
published?
Well, here's the killer,
Oh my
the
gosh.
kicker.
What?
2017.
Oh, I can't stand
Right
it.
after
Do you think he went rogue, like he saw what was coming and couldn't handle it? Because
well,
I don't see him. I mean, granted, this is a 2019 CV, but he didn't do much after 2016.
but he was still there.
He was,
Look, having worked in the classified environment, there's a lot of people that really want to tell people what they're working on.
right.
And it tells me that one scenario is that he really thought they were working to track a potential outbreak
Right.
and put some, or he felt guilty that it looked more and more like they weren't, because why would you violate Obama's order if it's all on the up and up?
Mhm.
And I think I think good homework, if you will, like, go through Donaldson's resume and then compare it to the indictment of Morenz, Dr. Morenz, because you know who all the you'll know right away who all the conspirator one, conspirator two, which they try to hide on the indictment.
Right.
Well, they're all right there in Donaldson's resume with the
Right.
dates.
Do
And
you think they're the same people?
well, they're definitely talking about Dajik.
Right.
They talk about a company.
Right.
And if you look at the sharing of information, now we're on the indictment part with Morenz. The big charge there is the fact that they were giving classified information over to, if they were giving it over to Dajik and he didn't have a clearance or his facility wasn't cleared to handle classified biomedical research, that's huge.
Yeah.
And I see from
Wait, who's they?
The NIH. The government scientists, if they were sharing with EcoHealth Alliance, which is a private nonprofit, that's a big problem. And if you read the indictment on Morenz, I would just say more to come, because they normally don't want, they being the DOJ, they normally don't, they care about, what's his name, Morenz, but they really want the big fish.
Didn't I say that? You were working, but I said I bet Brian would say they're leaning on the second guy to put pressure on the big guy.
And here's the disgusting thing. I just read while Naomi was on the Democratic Oversight Committee's review of the Fauci handling. Morenz is mentioned in there. They said in the thing, in that overview, he definitely was guilty and violated the law and all that, and did nothing about it. Didn't arrest him, didn't do anything. It took the badgering of Rand Paul to finally get, and
can I just say something about that?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm so sick of the kind of theatrical half measures that gesture at justice, but leave things essentially undisturbed. Now that I've read this CV in detail, which I never had done in this kind of detail, it's shocking. It's shocking, right? This is the most shock. This is, guys, of all the work I've ever done. Wait, I'm getting somewhere. Interpreting what Brian found is the most important work I've ever done. Brian found this CV. I just read through it and explained it to you the best I understand it. That is, like, this is one of the single most important documents I've ever seen in terms of the history of the last 100 years in my life. And because this has the whole plan in the science,
a good amount
step
of it.
by step by step. You're right. The key elements. Wait, can you wait just 1 second, honey? Now I've lost my train of thought.
The key elements, the most important, lays out the whole plan, key elements.
Oh, yeah. So what I'm worried about is Rand Paul is saying Dr. Fauci lied to Congress. That's not the biggest crime revealed in this CV. Dr. Fauci funded the murder of millions of people. That's the crime. Dr. Fauci funded illegal gain-of-function experimentation in the United States that could have infected Americans. That's the crime. Dr. Fauci funded, a deadly virus that then got out, intentionally or not. I still don't understand that part. It lied about it and concealed the fact that he funded research that was illegal that went on to kill people. That's the crime. It's not about lying to Congress.
It's worse.
How is it worse? How can it be worse?
I want to push back on what I heard you say earlier, but that it was all us, it was all America. No, it wasn't.
I didn't say all, but it was us.
So what was happening is the reason it went to China, the research, is because gain of function was outlawed.
Right.
So this is prior to Wuhan coming into the picture.
Right.
So then once Obama put a stop to it, there was some overlap, and they also, through DAJIC and EcoHealth Alliance, brought that research to China. And I don't want to say without authorization, because you're not going to move all that stuff without someone like Obama signing off on it.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, now we're bringing our research, against an executive order to our major adversary, China, who then you can do anything in China with gain of function.
Right.
So
and they copy stuff all the time.
I think that's where it really got amplified. And I think Naomi's right. If you look at the outbreak maps, you're going to see some weird patterns. You're going to see things popping up in Seattle, Boston, pretty much near all the labs too. You're also going to see it popping up in places beyond like Japan, but very few popping up in Japan, even though that's the most flights between like Wuhan and Japan, like tons of business routes. It takes a while to pop up there.
Right.
So my point is, like, we have an entire thing where you have one of our largest. So HHS is easily the biggest budgeted organization in the U.S. government. It's right up there with DoD, and handing the keys to a potentially deadly virus to our enemies, then bringing it back here. And it's my belief that, and I got no proof of this, but I got to say,
you're right.
I've got to say, like, I think they kind of wanted to see what it would do.
Right.
And the scientists involved, Chinese
but
included.
Like Chinese or
Chinese
Dr.
and
Fauci,
Americans,
everyone.
Because why would you kind of just hand it over
to our
to
adversaries?
DAJIC, who's Ukrainian,
Right.
and
What?
yeah, he's from Ukraine.
Oh
he's American, but he's from Ukraine. He lives right down the street from us in Hudson Valley, that. And so, an hour away. But the thing is, and then you can say, oh, the Chinese let it go. And they actually talk about this in the Seventh Extinction, about how you have to get it to a foreign government so they get the blame. Now, I'm not saying China's.
What a traitor.
You got to read the book and go deeper into Donaldson. And I'd recommend to everyone, go back and read the indictment on Moran's that dropped 2 days ago, and read the actual indictment, because it lays it all out. And you can kind of put it together. And you know what? I don't agree with everything Rand Paul does, but I got to give him credit. He has been a dog on a bone with this. And one final thing.
I agree, but I'm not going to be okay with it being, you lied to Congress. That's like 5 years. This is the biggest mass murder in history.
What that did is that kept it open. That keeps an investigation
but I don't want
open.
it to stop there. Baby.
It won't. You've got to read that indictment.
All right, baby.
And what they're doing with that indictment, typically they're going to, Moran's, he's going to make a deal. That guy probably right now has tons of protection from the DOJ, because someone's going to want to take him out. But the final thing I want to say is, Rand Paul in the third.
God forbid.
Rand Paul in the third hearing with Fauci, he said, right now you have 11 labs doing this in the United States, this gain of function. So if you go to you probably have to go to the archive site, go to go to bat1health.org, which was set up by DAJIC and the same people, Peter, I forgot his other guy's name, but all the same scientists. They had something called bat1health.org, which was one of the chapters was right there in the institute near our house for eco studies. Cary Institute of Ecosystem Studies. Go scroll to the main page, go down and count how many labs they have in North America, and it's 11. They're all on the map.
That's what I was thinking. The 11 labs in North America.
Bat1health.org.
Holy cow.
If it's still up, if not, go to the Internet Archives.
All right.
I'm going to be out, so you guys.
Yeah. I know. Well, we see a little more than 6 watching, but I hear you that this is, for such a bombshell broadcast, it's interestingly small number of people, but we'll get it out there. I don't know what to say. I've rarely been this dumbfounded in my life. I will have to sleep on this, but you guys, it's up to the independent media. You got to share this video. We'll create a transcript and post it on Outspoken and Daily Clout. Kudos to Brian O'Shea, who found this CV. And you're right, baby. The day that we posted it, the day I posted it, reposted it from you, I got kicked off of X in 2021. It's a shocking, shocking, shocking document. I hope I've done some public service in trying to walk you through why it's so important. Just spread the word. With God's help, we'll get some justice. They can find you at Real Brian O'Shea on X.
Do not
go to Brian O'Shea SPI. It has been hacked. We need your support, you guys. This is journalism you're not going to see in the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, certainly not. But it takes resources. We have a team to pay. So please support us. Go to Outspoken on Substack and become a subscriber, a paid subscriber if you can. $70 a year, or a one-time donation over on Daily Clout. We really do need your help to keep the fires burning, to bring you this kind of shocking, unrestrained, mind-blowing reporting. You're welcome. And kudos again, Brian O'Shea. I love you guys. And thanks to all of you for your excellent comments. Yes, I did see Mickey Willis's documentary, Dee Dee, and you're awesome. But please spread the word. They wanted to kill us off. And one guy who was guilt-ridden wrote a novel about it. Like Genesis, the Genesis Project. They wanted to start all over. Like Genesis who? Who was going to repopulate the earth? That's the next question. I can't believe I'm doing this episode. Okay, love you guys. Thank you. Thank you all. I will hang up now and have many nightmares. Bye-bye, you guys. Talk to you tomorrow.